Our last speaker, to wrap it all up, is Marni Jameson. She's the Executive Director of the Association of Independent Doctors, which I'm on the advisory board of. Marni is the Executive Director of Association of Independent Doctors, a national nonprofit designated to support the interest of independent physicians. She's an award-winning journalist. She started in the journalistic industry. She worked for the LA Times. She worked for the Orlando Sentinel. She's published a couple of books. She lives in Winter Park, Florida, and she's started an amazing organization which has gotten up to lots of members now in most of the states. So Marni, come on up.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Tom, and thank you all for sticking it out. I'll be the finale. I think you'll find this sort of, I hope, inspiring. It's not medical, it's more business. That's why you're not going to get CME credits, but that isn't an excuse to leave. I want to talk to you a little bit about how this association got started, what we're doing to help doctors stay independent, and why that's important. So, in April of 2013, 2 certified public accountants in Winter Park decided, and these are headlines that have happened since once we've established the association, not because of us, it's just that the word is getting out. These 2 accountants have a practice that about 40% of their practice is independent doctors, medical groups. They represent several hundred doctors. And they have about 24 people who work for them. It's a big going concern. They've been around since the 80s. And they were looking around saying, you know, this trend of hospitals buying up doctors groups is not good. It's not good for doctors, it's not good for patients, it's not good for America, and nobody's saying anything about it. Somebody should. And they looked at each other and said, well, maybe we should. So in April of 2013, they founded the Association of Independent Doctors. They called about 100 independent doctors together, and each one of those doctors ponied up about $1,000 to give the organization some seed money, and off they went. I was working at the time, as Tom mentioned, I came out of a journalism background. I owned a medical marketing firm in Los Angeles for many years, sold that, started writing for the LA Times as their health reporter, moved to Denver. The LA Times didn't seem to notice that I was in Denver, and then one day they woke up and said, you know, you're halfway across the country, we could sure use a senior health reporter in Orlando. So I was ready to make a change, and off I went. So I was writing for the Orlando Sentinel, and these 2 accountants, I'd interviewed them before, and I had been interviewing folks when hospitals were buying up groups, and we had a big acquisition of 95 doctors get acquired. And when the hospitals were buying up these physician groups, I was trying to report on it from 360 degrees, as we're trained to do, from the hospital side, from the doctor's side, from the insurance company side, from the patient side. And it was all sort of smoke and mirrors. It was a very squishy story, but then I would talk to Tom Thomas, the accountant, and everything would become clear. And as a journalist, it's frustrating because what I think and what I report and what I know are often 3 different things. And what I knew was this was really bad for patients. And what I could report was a balanced story that really wasn't getting the story out. And partly, I'm sorry to say, it's because of advertising. We have huge advertisers in the hospitals in our community, and the editors tamp down any criticism and bring up, they turn the volume up on anything that's pro-hospital. It just happens. It's economics, and I don't fault the papers. It's just a shame. So I was getting a little frustrated and seeing my stories get watered down. But I did go to this first meeting of the Association of Independent Doctors, and I covered it. And it was on the front page of the Orlando Sentinel the next day, and this story got shared. And pretty soon the association had about 280 doctors. And then, so Tommy and Carol are getting a lot of phone calls from independent doctors. They're sending a lot of emails, but meanwhile they have full-time accounting firms to run. So they asked me to dinner. I thought they wanted more media, which is why I usually get asked to dinner. And they said, no, we really need someone to help run this organization. We need an executive director. We have enough doctors on board. We need someone who can communicate the issues, who can put a face on this thing and get out and do what I'm doing, spread the word. So on September 1st, I joined the Association of Independent Doctors as their executive director. And since, in the 2 years since, we were at the time, we had 280 members. We're now close to 1,000. We're in 27 states. We have 4 chapters, one in Florida, and these are critical masses of doctors. We have 260 doctors in Maine. We have 50 in South Carolina. It looks like we're gonna sweep up a bunch more pretty soon. And thanks to Tom Lagrilius, we have a chapter in Los Angeles of a group that he founded and came under our umbrella, and we are making some headway. So we're bi-coastal, we're growing really fast. I like this state map. Now, with these little light blue states are very flimsy. We have 1 or 2 members in those states, but it's a start. We're trying to get a foothold, and I'd love to see this map filled with chapters in every state. We're doing this because the number of independent doctors in America is shrinking. In 2000, 57% of doctors were independent. Today, that number is only 1 in 3. That's going the wrong direction. Here, this is basically the same chart from Accenture. It's discouraging. Why is it so bad? Well, it's driving up costs, compromising care, and driving good physicians out of practice, except unless they go into concierge medicine, which is the smart thing to do. They're doing it, doctors are going into employment. As you know, doctors are trained to be scientists. They're trained to treat patients. They're not trained, they don't have their MBAs, some do, but they think the hospitals, because the hospitals, we'll get to this in a minute, get so much more money for every procedure that an independent doctor does. They can afford to pay the doctors more because they get the facility fee and they get the higher reimbursement rate from the insurer because of their bargaining power. The doctors think they're going to have more money, more perceived security, someone else is going to pay for the overhead. They're going to have more referrals because the hospital is going to channel patients right into their door, and they're going to avoid the EMR investment. I get it. I get why doctors go to work for the hospital. It's not their fault. I'm not blaming them. It's very tempting. Of course, hospitals do it to capture, control market share, get more money for the same service, boost diagnostic tests, and capture the market, capture referrals. Okay, so one of the problems with this consolidation, and there's the horizontal consolidation of hospitals buying up hospitals and hospitals buying up clinics, and then there's the vertical consolidation of hospitals buying up medical groups. They're both bad. Both of them are driving up the cost of healthcare. And if they do that, they're lowering the quality. We're going to get to some specifics in a minute, but I want to kind of give you the overview of why this is bad for everyone. The AHIP, the American Health Insurance Plans, has looked at this. They don't really have a dog in the fight. These are insurance plans. They look at it and go, after a hospital acquires a medical group, costs go up 20 to 40%. I think that's modest. Let's look at this one. I'm not cherry picking here. The costs go up on average 4 times. When a hospital-owned facility does a procedure, it costs 4 times more than if the same procedure is done in an independent doctor's facility. This is from the Medicare Payment Advisory Commission. These are just the statistics out there. They have long advocated for parity in pay, site-neutral payments. We're starting to move in that direction, but we're a long way away. But look at this. I'm an independent doctor. I charge, make it $1 sign. That same employed doctor who works for a hospital charges 3 times more for the same visit. Now that may not be so bad, but say you go to your primary care doctor because you hurt your knee, and then he refers you to an independent orthopedist who refers you to an independent imaging center where you get an x-ray, who refers you to a freestanding surgical center. Follow that same trajectory if you go to an employed primary care doctor who's sending you to an employed specialist, who's sending you to a hospital-owned imaging center and a hospital-owned surgical center. You're talking the difference between $10,000 and $50,000 easily. And this is happening all across America. So we're really trying to work hard the American Hospital Association spends $20 million lobbying on Washington. Independent doctors spend 0, except for Tom and me when we go up a couple times a year and try to raise some cane. Not getting us too far. We're getting there though. So this is what we're trying to stop from happening. We're trying to explain it to the patients. We're trying to explain it to the consumers. This is another part of the problem. We saw a cost line in Michael's slide earlier that showed this pretty much the same trajectory starting in 1980 about the increase in healthcare spending, but what it didn't show was how many administrators are part of that picture. The doctors aren't the problem, folks. They're down here. It's all the administrators that are padding their parts and charging the facilities fees and working with insurance companies to get higher reimbursement rates and then buying up the doctors. We talked about the quality issue earlier, or I mentioned it in one of my points. The reason the quality goes down is not only because the competitive edge is lost anytime there's a monopoly form, competition falls away, but it's also going down because when a physician works for a hospital, the physician is required to refer to other physicians who work for the hospital. Anything outside of that is called leakage. So let's say I'm a primary care doctor. I work for the hospital, my patient has a breast lump, I know the very best breast surgeon is an independent doctor who's going to look at this and take it out and biopsy it and have all the right medical recommendations. But I can't refer to him because that's leakage. I need to refer to another breast surgeon who works for the hospital. He may or may not, she may or may not be as good, but I don't have the opportunity to refer to the best person I know. And that is what dilutes the access. Patients don't realize their quality of care is going down and their access is going down. The doctor also has to refer to the hospital-owned imaging center, the hospital-owned surgical center. So all of that raises costs because the doctors are getting measured on their quotas. How many patients do they admit to the hospital? How many other employed physician referrals do they make? How many tests are they ordering? How many procedures they're doing in the facility, and they get measured on that. And so the allegiance, and here's probably the worst thing of all, the allegiance that the doctor has with his patient shifts from the patient to the employer. It has to. It's where his bread is buttered. So that is harming, it's causing a lot of overutilization in healthcare. And so when independent doctors have that direct relationship, as they do with concierge medicine and they do when they're independent, that relationship stays much more pristine. It's not perfect, but a lot better. So here's another example of healthcare costs going up. Just a report, the American Medical Association, 36 to 53% Medicare payments just in the example of imaging. So here's one from JAMA, independent doctor, mean cost per inpatient, hospital-owned doctor, mean cost per inpatient, multi-hospital-owned doctor. Now extrapolate this out over millions of patients and millions of visits and more consolidation. And we can start to understand why the costs of healthcare are skyrocketing. It's not something a lot of people are talking about. So fewer jobs. When independent medical groups get acquired by the hospital, sometimes these medical groups have been in business for a long time, 20, 50 years. And they have loyal staff that have been working every day in the office coming in. And all of a sudden the hospital's going to take over the management of the practice. These people lose their jobs. These are people who go out in the community, go out to dinner, go to the movies, use the dry cleaner, and now they're out of work. So it's decimating communities in terms of the job loss and the increased prices, but also the higher taxes. Nonprofit hospitals, and that's well over half of the hospitals in our country, pay no real estate tax, no sales tax, no property tax, no income tax. Now, think about that. How many hospitals are you seeing behaving like a nonprofit? How many nonprofit hospitals really do look like a nonprofit? I'm sorry, the two huge hospital systems in my area, Orlando Health and Florida Hospital, which is owned by Adventist, they pay their executives 7 figures. They have skyboxes. They have billboards on I-4 highway. They have boondoggle trips to places. They have private jets. The nuns are gone, yet these people are behaving like they're a nonprofit, giving charitable care. We encouraged a reporter and we teed it up for them between my accountant colleagues and my some of my access. I went to the Orlando Sentinel and I said, would you please do a study of how much Orlando Health and Florida Hospital would pay in taxes if they paid just property taxes? Would you look at all the land parcels they own? And they fly under all these different names, so it was quite a project. And then they looked at only 3 counties in Central Florida. Well, they found out that if those hospitals truly spent paid the taxes they should pay, our community would get $45 million every year. That's a lot. $45 million could put a lot of cops on the street, could rehabilitate a lot of libraries and little league fields, help teachers, but it's not happening. And the taxes go away when the hospitals buy up these medical groups that were paying taxes. They go from being for-profit to being nonprofit. So the community is getting decimated and they don't know what's happening under their own noses. And oh, by the way, they fly under a faith-based mission that this is all, charity and all for a good cause. The latest statistics out show that, all across the board, 54% of doctors are reporting that they are unsatisfied or very unsatisfied with their professions. And the more satisfied ones are the independent. I'd like to see the study on concierge, but definitely the happier doctors are independent doctors. They're not working for administrators telling them how many patients they need to admit, how many patients they need to see, what kind of prosthetic they need to put in, and what kind of gloves they can use. They don't really relish having a mid-level administrator telling them, they who've had 12 years of college, how they can practice medicine. Nor do they appreciate insurance companies telling them what care is appropriate and what care isn't. That's not why they went to that much medical school. It's frustrating. So what are we doing? AID is working to push transparency in pricing. We talked about that earlier, help patients see what things really cost. We're fighting really hard, and I'll tell you in a minute about what we're doing with the FTC to prevent consolidation. We're working with the media to educate consumers about the importance of using an independent doctor, and we're challenging the tax-exempt status that we think is an abuse of the tax code. So we'd like to see facility fees gone. I mean, in a perfect world, if I were president or king or queen of the universe, I'd like to make sure these just don't even happen. But hospitals say they need them to keep the lights on 24/7. But at a minimum, in Connecticut, they passed a law because the governor himself got burned by this. He found out about a facility fee and he didn't even know it existed. Well, now it's a law in Connecticut that before the patient gets to the doctor providing the service, that patient needs to be informed in no uncertain terms, oh, there's a facility fee and this is what it is. And oh, by the way, if you went into an independent doctor, you wouldn't pay that facility fee. We're trying to get this passed. I'd like to see this in all 50 states, but we're hopeful. We do have it, the FMA, Florida Medical Association, has approved a resolution that I wrote based on this, and they're backing it to go forward in our legislature. We have a member in Kansas who's doing the same thing, and also one in South Dakota. So we're trying to get this kind of law in the books in other states. We would like that third-party payers pay the same amount of money for the same procedure, because the minute the hospitals raise the rates on a procedure and raise the reimbursements, the employers cry foul, and the insurance companies have to cut the money somewhere, and who gets cut? The independent doctor. And then the more the hospital makes, the more they can afford to buy the doctors who are now getting less reimbursement. It's a flywheel. So we're trying to level the playing field to take that dynamic out of the system. We'd like to see hospitals stop acquiring doctors' practices, period, but in a perfect world, that would be the case. In an imperfect world, how about if we just say you could only own 40% of one specialty? You can't own 80% of the cardiologists in town. Just 40% to keep competition alive, please. I think that's reasonable. I think there should be some kind of a lid on how much a hospital can monopolize an entity. I mean, oncology is really bad. A study came out of USC just recently that showed that when cancer patients get oncology treatment, chemotherapy from a employed physician, a cancer center owned by a hospital, the costs are 34% higher than if they go with a freestanding facility for the same care. So these are the kinds of egregious pricing that's happening in our community, and we're just rubber stamping it. Unfortunately, it's one of those things where patients still believe that the more they pay, the better something is. It's a consumer mentality. The more you pay for a car, the better the car is, maybe. And they think that its quality and price are somehow related, but as we've seen, it's not. So we have been working with the FTC. I'm very proud of this. Before I came to work for AID, the founders agreed to pay $40,000 out of a meager coffer of money that we had amassed through memberships to hire a Washington-based attorney to write an amicus brief. I didn't know what that was. It's a friend of the court opinion, to support the FTC in its efforts to try to unravel a merger that had happened all across the country in Idaho. You may have been familiar with the St. Luke's case. They bought Salter Medical System, a 45-doctor practice. A little hospital down the street, the St. Alphonsus Medical Group, cried foul. St. Luke said, oh no, we're streamlining care. It's going to be much better for everyone. We'll make it really efficient and lower the prices. Like that's ever happened. St. Alphonsus said, no, we think you just violated antitrust laws. The FTC agreed with them. And they sued the St. Luke's, and the Idaho District Court upheld the decision. Actually said, we believe the FTC is correct, that this just violated antitrust laws. You need to divest yourself of this merger. Well, St. Luke's didn't like that answer, and they appealed it to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, the court right under the Supreme Court, so it's the highest court next to the Supreme Court, and that's when we came in. We were asked to write an amicus brief saying why this is so bad for patients and for the community, and we hired this attorney, and he wrote that, and sure enough, in February of 2015, that appellate court voted to support the decision of the Idaho District Court and said that this merger had to be unwound. That was the first time in American history that a hospital had to divest itself of an acquisition of a practice. So we were very excited about that. And it put hospitals all around the country on notice. You do this, you too could be sued. Fast forward, this goes in the no good deed goes unpunished department. To this summer, I saw there was some consolidation activity going on in Pennsylvania. Hershey Medical Group, Hershey Penn State, it was Penn State Medical Center, Hershey Penn State, and Pinnacle were consolidating their healthcare systems, forming a huge consolidation in central Pennsylvania that was going to definitely eliminate competition and raise prices. And of course, the only people who benefit are the hospital executives, right? But they are trying to play it and spin it that this is all good for the community. Well, the FTC was fighting it, and it was falling on deaf ears. I wrote an editorial that ran in about 6 or 7 Pennsylvania newspapers. It said, you know, with judges like this, because they'd let this merger go through, who needs the FTC? We don't listen to them anyway. What's the point of having antitrust laws when we have judges like this in the country, just rubber stamping every consolidation that comes along? This particular judge's argument, says, that's the way Obamacare is going. That's the way the direction of the country is going. We might as well go along. Well, that's no way to go through life. You're a judge. If it's a bad idea, if it's unconstitutional, stop it. So I spouted all this out in an editorial, and I get a call. I was on the road. I don't know I feel like I was traveling for something you were involved with. But I get a call from the head of litigation for the FTC asking me if I would submit another amicus brief. I'm like, I'm not a lawyer. And we don't have the money to hire another Washington, D.C. law firm to do this. So I don't think so. I said, I'm a journalist. And he said, I think that's refreshing. I still want you to do it. I'm like, okay. So that's how I spent my summer vacation, writing an amicus brief for the Pennsylvania case. And then right on the heels of that, and that's the Third District Court of Appeals, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals for the Circuit Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit, something like that, is still considering that. Meanwhile, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit in Illinois is considering another case where we have North Shore, an advocacy group, merging together or trying to merge. We're trying to say, stop, let's block that merger, don't do it. The FTC doesn't want to see it happen, so I wrote another amicus brief in this case. So we're watching these. But what's so important about that? Well, so in July, after I'd done 2 amicus briefs for the FTC in these cases, Carol and Tommy were at a tax conference up in Washington, D.C., and they said, Marni, now that you're so chummy with the FTC, could you get a meeting for us? So I did. I brokered a meeting, and Tommy and Carol, Tommy's the vocal one, sat down with the 7 attorneys in the Bureau of Competition at the FTC and told them all, laid it all out, what is happening in America with the doctors, what is going on and why that's so bad. And my understanding is they were riveted. They stayed after hours for an hour and a half and listened to Tommy explain. So we have the access, we have the voice, we're now making a difference, and now whenever some shenanigan is going on, I can beeline it right up to the FTC and they're getting it. So I think this is going to make a difference. I'm excited about that. So this is another battle we're fighting. I mean, it's a David and Goliath situation, but we need to get more people to realize what the nonprofit hospitals are doing and get them to behave like for-profits, or they have to pay taxes. Just pay taxes if you're going to make that kind of money. Here's Florida Hospital, they pay no taxes. We don't think they should charge master prices. Here's what I mean by that. The average charge master price, this is from the Florida Bar Journal. Charge master prices, in the Stephen Brill article, you'll know this if you read that. It talks about what the hospital says the cost of care is and what Medicare reimburses. It's a huge difference, but this is what they base their charitable contribution on. They add up this column, not this column, and they call that community service. I'd like to expose that for what it is. We're working with patients. We have an online directory, people who join AID who choose to be in the online directory, and not all do. It's in a vehicle for a patient to say, I live in Columbia, South Carolina, I need an allergist, and I want to go to someone independent, and they're listed there. We don't give them the health grade or anything like that, but it's a start, because our campaign that we have sent out to many counties is the first question the patient should ask his or her physician is, are you independent or employed? Not, do you take Blue Cross? First find out if they're independent, and then everything flows from there. So we're working with the media. I've been interviewed a couple hundred times since I started working with AID. We're working with businesses to understand the importance of directing their employees to independent practitioners. We're having some success there. We're working with lawmakers, and we're working with doctors to help them stay independent. I'll tell you a couple examples of how we're doing that. Here's an example. Does anybody recognize the big guy in the middle? That's Governor LePage, who's often in trouble, because these are 2 aid members. We were in Maine, and I was able to sit with Governor LePage for an hour and a half and explain to him the predicament that America's doctors were in, because he has 260, I think that's the whole population of Maine actually, 260 doctors from Maine who are in our chapter. So when I have a mass of people in a state, I can get access to lawmakers. Pete Wilson is a champion of ours. This is the meeting that Tom and I go to a couple times a year, and he's a big proponent. We try to get he has some influence up on Capitol Hill. I think it's important, I like doctors to join AID. It's $500 a year, by the way, tax deductible. I like doctors to join for the macro reasons, to support us doing all the things I just told you about. But most of them say, well, what's in it for me? I get that too. Their times are tight. So we have this McKesson discount, and Tom is on our executive committee. He heard on the phone the other day one of our executive board members who happens to live in Maine. In fact, it's the fellow we just saw, the fellow on the far left, Dr. Branch. He's a plastic surgeon. Plastic surgeon specializes in hand, does a lot of workman's comp. He is saving, we have a member discount program through McKesson that opens them up to a group purchasing organization. He has a surgical facility that he owns. He saved $25,000 through this program in 2015, and year to date, and we're in September, he saved $16,000 so far. So he's like, I have 18 years of aid membership paid for. So it's a great value. It's kind of a no-brainer. I forget to mention it because I get so passionate about the rest of the stuff. We also provide answers and ammunition. When we have a doctor calling, should I join this ACO? Should I join this CIN? We have a person on our board who's a lawyer, and we have 2 accountants. They're sharp, and they can help answer and field these questions for our doctors, so we back them up. This is what we need to do. I'm 5'3" with a voice like Snow White. I can only do so much, but we need to get bigger and louder. We need to grow our membership. I want to deepen my roots in every state. We're spreading out nicely. I appreciate that. I'd love for you to spread the word. I'd love for you to join. I'd love for you to support our cause. One more thing, on November 5th, there's the flyers out in the exhibit hall. We are having our first aid member meeting, a conference in Orlando, and depending on where you live, that's a nice place to be, November 5th. It's at the Walt Disney Swan and Dolphin Resort, and we have a lineup of killer speakers, 6 CME credits, all that. Love for you to come. Any questions? Yes?
Marni, I've never quite understood how the hospitals were able to charge more for the same ICD code and the same service and everything. How did that evolve, and what's their story? How is it justified?
There are 2 reasons hospitals charge more for the same procedure. One is they actually negotiate higher reimbursement rates for the same procedure because they have so many lives, they have more bargaining power. So, and they can also argue that, we have to keep the lights on 24/7. So they get higher reimbursements from Medicare, and then from there everything trickles down. All the payers then get in line and start paying. I mean, if a payer says, I'm sorry, we can't pay you that, we're gonna keep our rates where they are, they say, well then fine, we won't accept Blue Cross patients. So they end up with an argument, and as their rates go up, then obviously independent doctors goes down. The other reason is that they do charge facility fees. These are, again, the hospitals has a strong lobbying voice, and they have gotten these away with this facility fee. It's illegal, it's in the system, and they just argue, oh, we're taking care of the really poor and the sick, and we're offering all this charitable care, we have an emergency room, we're open 24/7, independent doctors don't have to do that, therefore we deserve this additional fee.
Second question, when they buy, say, 80% of the cardiologists, which actually is happening in my city, in Fort Myers, Florida, why don't antitrust laws apply to that?
We're working on it. It's a very good question, and that's exactly what Tommy was saying. There's this kind of monopoly is every bit as serious. And then this gentleman has a question. This kind of monopoly is every bit as serious as the horizontal ones. What the FTC has told me, they're pretty they're small. They're not as big as some of the other agencies in government. They're great. They're smart. They're hardworking. but they say, we're putting our eggs in the horizontal consolidation, the hospitals buying hospitals, and they think these are too slight. But we're pointing out to them that this kind of monopolization is every bit as insidious as the horizontal kind. And the lights are going on. Yes?
You know, the one thing that I hope Congress hears, there's perverse incentives, not only coming from the hospital, but from Washington, D.C. themselves, with Medicare requirements, whether we're going to start taking, core measures and move those into private practice. So the hospitals here have been very big at saying, you know what, if we don't do this together, then you're going to eventually be directed by them. Is their reason. So, I guess I would just like to hear your messaging more of, there's more incentives just in the hospital that are driving patients' care.
The hospitals want to own and dominate, control, and get them a lot more money. It's just about making profits. They're a business, and they're very good at it.
Yeah.
And the business people, I'm sorry, are always going to be 2 steps ahead of government. And so every time government figures something out, the Florida hospital, or the executives, I always pick on Florida hospital, the executives are 2 steps ahead, saw it coming and have done an end run. Look at the insurance ratio where Obamacare came out and said, well, 20 cents of every insurance premium dollar has to go back to patients and 80 cents has to go to claim, or 20% can go to the administration of the insurance company, but 80 cents of every dollar has to go directly to patient claims. Well, that sounds really great. And the businessmen go, well, fine, we'll just charge 50% more. Then their 20% becomes 30%. Duh.
And, then the hospitals turn around and say, just with the increased regulation, what's happening, they're having to, once you, HCAPS is a great example. We spend our whole time in a medical executive committee on the hospital talking about HCAPS and how to improve those scores for the hospital. So it's really that's why I say the incentives are on
government
both sides
intrusion, hospital executive intrusion, and third-party payer intrusion is what's breaking down the doctor-patient relationship,
absolutely.
And we're very opposed to all of it.
Yeah, good.
So, Jeff?
Just a quick comment and see what your thoughts are on it. About 4 or 5 years ago, we were looking to hire a new physician in our private practice. We were not concierge at the time. And every single person that we interviewed, I really felt like they were leaning towards joining a hospital for multiple reasons. Mm-hmm. Perhaps the better salaries or a little extra risk when you go out into private practice. They're used to it. They saw hospitalists running around when they were residents, so it's just kind of the thing to do. Give me your thoughts about the new generation of physician that's coming out. Do they really want private practice? And are you really salvaging what we may have, but not necessarily what new physicians want in the future?
It's a very big challenge. The whole idea of new medical students coming out of college and they don't have a practice that they're selling. They don't know how to get their first patient. They don't know where the referrals are coming from. They have huge amount of student loan debt. And then the idea of a hospital coming in and swooping them up and saying, you just practice medicine, don't worry your pretty little head, we'll take care of the rest. Very tempting. I don't have a solution except if they can foresee the train wreck and how everyone looks at it from their eyes, but they are not looking at it from America. You saw that line of how our spending is and where our results are. We've got to bring that line down. We have to spend less and do better, and we're going to do a lot better if the patients get back to seeing their doctor without all the intrusion of everybody else in the room directing that care. So I just hope that the wheels start turning and we get the message out. My job as a communicator, I can't remove a gallbladder, I can't read an x-ray, but I can usually take something pretty complicated and make it understandable. So I think I'm in the right place at the right time. I think I can talk to the media and I can talk to consumers, I can say, look, here's what you need to know, and this is why this isn't working. And don't let them pull the wool over your eyes. So all I can do is that and hope the tide will start to turn. We do offer a lower $100 membership for students, and I'm very happy to say Deborah German, who's the dean, and then I'll stop talking because I know I'm the one who has to catch a plane. She brought all of her residents, she bought them all memberships at AID. She's the dean of UCF School of Medicine, which is based in Lake Nona in Orlando. And so she so believes in our cause that she bought them all memberships, which I thought was really nice. Anyway, thank you all.
Marni, thank you very much. That was excellent.